Well, welcome everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's public webinar for the City of Virginia Beach Coastal Storm Risk Management Feasibility Study. My name is Heather Lockwood, and I'm the project manager. So before we get started with the presentation, I'd like to just kind of share some general information about today's meeting. And just as for awareness, we are recording this meeting, and we're going to post it on our website for those that were unable to attend today to be able to view at a later date. And so to kick us off, on our next slide, I'd like to introduce our Norfolk District team leads, and then I'll turn it over to leadership for some opening remarks from both the Norfolk District and our sponsor, the City of Virginia Beach. So the Virginia Beach Coastal Storm Risk Management, or CSRM, as you're going to probably hear that acronym throughout the day today, study team is composed of a group of diverse experts across our enterprise. The team leads that we have on the study include Shannon Kelly for engineering, Christina Parker for real estate, Justine Woodward for environmental, Andrew Lobo for economics, and Nicole Miller for planning. So now I'll turn it over to Michelle Hamer, our Chief of Planning and Policy Branch at the Norfolk District, for some opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We certainly greatly appreciate you investing your time with us. As we advance the feasibility study, we continue to refine measures, including structural measures such as flood walls and storm surge barriers, and non-structural measures such as elevations of homes and floodproofing, and what you'll hear about natural and hybrid infrastructure as well to address the coastal storm risk within the City of Virginia Beach. The array of measures helps us address the unique challenges in our study area and helps us formulate alternatives. But a really key piece of this information is, or this evaluation is certainly to pause and share with you where we are and provide an opportunity to ask questions. So really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for your interest. We look forward to the conversation. And with that, I will hand it over to Mike.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Tippin, and I lead the Stormwater Engineering Center for the City of Virginia Beach Department of Public Works. I want to thank everybody, for joining us today, and I appreciate all of you, for taking the time to be part of this really important conversation, about our community's resilience and long-term safety. So today, we're really going to focus on the Corps' Coastal Storm Risk Management, or CSRM, like you heard earlier. And that's really, it's a collaborative effort that's designed to better understand the risks that we face from the coastal storms and to evaluate the strategies that can reduce those risks in a more sustainable, kind of science-based way. Excuse me. And as many of you know, our coastline, it's a tremendous asset and a source of vulnerability for us. Be it storm surge, sea level rise, or increasingly frequent extreme weather events that continue to challenge our infrastructure, our economy, and our way of life. So, during today's session, we'll walk through the purpose, the alternatives under consideration, the timeline, and the opportunities for public engagement. So, thank you again for being here and for contributing to a safer, more resilient future, for our city. And with that, let's get started.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Michelle. So during today's presentation, I will be sharing of course, the study background, including where we are in the study process and what's left to complete. We'll also dive into what would happen if we did not implement this project. And this is also referred to as the Future Without Project, or here comes another acronym, FWAP. So we'll discuss the risk management measures that we're currently evaluating and additional opportunities for public engagement. And then we'll conclude with a question and answer session. So please feel free, though, during the meeting to use the chat. We have some other team members monitoring that. And so we can, have some discussion there. And then at the end, I'll also go through those chat question and answers. And then folks are welcome to come off mute and ask those questions too at the end. And then for anyone who maybe joined before the initial first few moments, just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded. And then we're going to, again, post it on our website for those that were unable to attend. So we'll start off with the study background. So of course, the study area is located within the city of Virginia Beach, which, as many of you know, is surrounded by our wonderful Chesapeake Bay, multiple rivers, and the Atlantic Ocean. And with all of that water, it leaves the city vulnerable to widespread and complex flooding. And so we have many areas within the city that have flood pathways coming from numerous directions, not just the open coast. And Virginia Beach has been documented as having some of the highest relative sea level change rates along the Atlantic coast. And so the city of Virginia Beach has been very active in finding and funding ways to reduce those flooding risks. For example, in 2020, they released the Sea Level Rise Adaptation Strategy in an effort to prepare for the future. And this has helped serve as a basis for this study, this larger comprehensive CSRM. And moving into some specific, now kind of diving into this study. As with all federal projects, we need a congressional authorization to study or implement a project. So the CSRM was authorized in 2018 by Section 1201 of the America's Water Infrastructure Act to identify long-term solutions to minimize risk from coastal storms through the project's 50-year economic period of analysis. It's a single-purpose coastal storm risk management study, which focuses on finding ways to reduce the risk to human life, health, and safety caused by coastal storms within the city of Virginia Beach. And after an authorization, the next step is an appropriation of funds. For this study, funding came a few years after authorization in 2022. And the total study cost is $13.5 million, and it's a 50-50 cost share between the Army Corps of Engineers and the city of Virginia Beach. This slide shows our feasibility process and feasibility, or our study phase process, and the major milestones that we are tracking. So this study will take a total of 5 years and 11 months. With the goal of concluding with a signed chief's report in the spring of 2028. So we're about a little bit over halfway there. Right now, the study team is focusing on the next major milestones, which are the release of the notice of intent and the tentatively selected plan, or you might hear that referred to as the TSP, so tentatively selected plan. The notice of intent says that we are preparing an environmental impact statement, and there will be a formal comment period and additional public meetings scheduled at that time. So look out for those additional meetings and opportunities for comment in a few months here. The TSP will be identified this fall and will be written in the draft report to share with the public a few weeks later. As you can see from the slide, any of those yellow stars, they indicate when we'll be having those formal NEPA or National Environmental Policy Act public comment periods. And it's very important to share your thoughts with us early and often, including today. Now I'm going to turn it over to Andrew, our lead economist, and he will share some information on how economics play a major role in the identification of the tentatively selected plan. Andrew?
Thanks, Heather. As Heather mentioned, my name is Andrew Lobo. I'm the lead economist on this study, and I'm going to be talking through the future without project condition, or what we call the FWOP. And first of all, why do we care about the FWOP? What is it? The FWOP describes the conditions throughout the study area here at Virginia Beach over the 50-year period of analysis. And essentially, we're thinking about it if the Corps does not take action. What that allows us to do is consider what we could do to reduce risk and ensure that anything that we suggest is scaled properly to the scope of the problem. But to determine any kind of solutions, you have to actually understand the problem, and that is what we're doing within the future without project condition. Thinking about it, I would first think about the hazard. And within this study, because it's a coastal storm risk management study, the hazard is coastal storms. So the figure that you're seeing on the right shows the extent and depth of water from one such storm. It's the 1% annual exceedance probability event. It's a lot of jargon there, but essentially it means that this is an event that could occur in any given year with 1% probability. And you can see the extent of the flooding is pretty significant, and there's pretty high water depths as well. This is one storm, but we're considering all of the storms that could happen over the course of the period of analysis. We also understand that risk increases over time because of sea level change. So we are using the high sea level change curve for formulation, but by policy, we consider the low or historic sea level change curve, the intermediate, and the high curve. So this is also not the only hazard. Flooding is not the only hazard. You also have erosion. You also have waves. So there's a lot to be concerned about, but the hazard itself is not the only part of the story. We also ask the question, what are the consequences of the hazard that we're looking at? So next slide, please. So within our consequences models, we're taking in this engineering information, the information about the hazard, and we're also putting in economics information, specifically information about the study area. So if you have something like that 1% AEP event, there's going to be a lot of different kinds of consequences. Some of them are physical damages. There's going to be damage to the structures in Virginia Beach. So that actually goes into our consequences engine. And we ask the question, if we have this storm, what are going to be the dollar-denominated damages that occur? If you have 2 feet of water in your living room, there's going to be damages. There's going to be, you might have to replace your drywall. Your car might float away. You might have damage to furniture. And we're trying to actually count those damages and roll them up to be able to say what the risk is in the study area, and also ways in which we could address it. We also acknowledge that flood damage to property is not the only source of damage. It's not the only consequence of coastal storms. You have life safety risk. You have risk to critical infrastructure, so the electrical grid or wastewater. You have risk to business. If your business is flooded out, there may be physical damage, but you might also have business interruption that goes on for weeks, months, or even years. There's also concerns for recreation. Erosion can impact beaches. And so we try and holistically consider all of the different consequences of coastal storm risk within these studies. Next slide, please. So this slide shows some of the areas of risk. Risk is actually the interplay between the hazard and the consequences. It understands that that 1% event that we were describing, that happens with a low probability, but there's high consequences. As was mentioned earlier, you also have high frequency events that cause damage. You can have damage from sunny day flooding. So we want to weight those events more heavily as we're describing the actual risk to the study area. The dots in the map, you can think of them as indicating areas of risk, either from high frequency events that cause low damage or low frequency events that cause high damage. But really here, what we're trying to indicate is the areas where you're seeing this risk. So you're seeing a fair amount of risk in Little Creek, at Lynn Haven, at Rudy, at Elizabeth River. So these are the areas that we would be looking at to consider what kind of measures we could implement to buy down that risk. And that's what these next couple of slides address.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate that. And I am Nicole Miller. I'm the planning lead. I'm going to go ahead and cover this next run of slides, beginning with providing a general overview of risk management measures, and then we'll get into some more specifics about measures being considered for this study. So a management measure is a feature or an activity that can be implemented at a specific geographic site to address one or more planning objectives. For coastal storm risk management, these measures can be divided into kind of 3 general categories: structural, non-structural, and natural and hybrid infrastructure, which was formerly referred to as nature-based solutions. So you might recognize that term more. So this first category, structural measures, are physical structures designed to reduce the frequency of damaging levels of inundation. Some common examples are levees, flood walls, and storm surge barriers. Next, we have non-structural measures. These, on the other hand, reduce flood damages without significantly altering the nature or extent of flooding. So that includes things like elevations of homes or equipment, floodproofing, relocation, and advanced warning systems. Then for natural and hybrid infrastructure, we might use the acronym NHI. That refers to the intentional alignment of natural processes, engineering design, and protective infrastructure to mitigate the impacts of natural hazards on critical infrastructure and the broader landscape, while also enhancing system resilience and ecological function. So examples include living shorelines and wetland restoration and enhancement. You can see some kind of examples or pictures of these examples on the slide here. So the team considers, options across these categories to develop alternative plans that include various combinations of risk management measures for evaluation and comparison. So we'll touch on non-structural and NHI later in the presentation. However, much of the focus is going to be an update on the progress of the structural measure development, which are generally really large and complex, especially for an area that is extremely vulnerable to widespread coastal storm risk. So we kind of referenced earlier, conceptual engineered defenses were presented in the city's sea level wise adaptation strategy for each of the watersheds in the area. This included storm surge barrier concepts at Lynnhaven, Rudy Inlet, and the eastern branch of the Elizabeth River. So this work served as a great starting point in the development of structural measures for consideration in the current feasibility study. And just a general overview, planning is a very iterative process. Risk management measures are refined and screened throughout the process based on a variety of factors, including things like study objectives, constraints, and stakeholder feedback. So in short, as we learn more, these measures become more specific and better refined, or better defined, excuse me. On the following slides, you'll see combinations of structural measures by the planning areas, which we're referring to as structural alignments. And currently, you can see on the map to the right that the study area is divided into 7 planning areas, and we'll kind of focus on each one more closely. So just before we look through the alignments, we just want to remind everybody that showing these proposed alignments does not infer support from all stakeholders. They're being considered and will continue to be evaluated through the study process, and further screening and refinements may occur. The intent is to continue getting the feedback and gathering information as we progress. So just wanted to make that disclaimer. And we will jump into the Little Creek planning area. So this one has a primary flood source of the Chesapeake Bay. And since the last round of public meetings in February 2025, there is one structural alignment moving forward for further consideration. That's the Little Creek 1 alignment, which includes a storm surge barrier comprised of a horizontal sector gate across the inlet and then associated floodwall and sand dune fortification along the bay front. So this concept was shown in the past. However, there have been and will continue to be modifications as we learn more. Particularly for this alignment, it does require coordination with both the Navy and the City of Norfolk. So the slide also includes a drawing of what the footprint for the gate could potentially look like, an example of an existing horizontal sector gate in New Bedford, and that's the bottom right there. So you can kind of get an idea of what we mean when we say horizontal sector gate. And then I'm also just going to make a quick note that the Norfolk CSRM project currently includes a proposed storm surge barrier at Pretty Lake, which is nearby. You can see that by the star on the map there. So both teams are coordinating and tracking potential implications closely. Just wanted to make a note of that. Next up is the Lynnhaven planning area, which experiences flooding from the Chesapeake Bay on the north side and the Atlantic Ocean to the east. The concept here includes a surge barrier comprised of a rising sector gate and a series of tainter gates on either side, and we'll show a image of this in a moment. Additional features such as a jetty may be required in association with the storm surge barrier. It also includes a combination of flood walls and sand dune fortification along both the bay and ocean fronts. Similar to the Little Creek alignment we just looked at, dunes are proposed along the bay side, and then there's a dune and flood wall combination along the ocean side, kind of mirroring the areas where similar structures currently exist. And you'll see the two options here, Lynnhaven 1A and 1B is a very similar alignment. The difference is the inclusion of a flood wall along Northampton Boulevard, which is located on the west side of alignment 1A on the left. And we need more refined modeling results to confirm this in the future, but early indications are that this flood wall would be necessary to prevent water from propagating east from Little Creek if the Little Creek 1 alignment is not included. So that's the distinguishing characteristic between these two alignments. And additionally, the team is evaluating a lock concept at the storm surge barrier, which we'll also see on the next slide. So just zooming in a little bit, this concept was shown at the previous public meetings in February 2025. The concept at the time included a series of 3 rising sector gates. And you can see an example of the rising sector gates at the Thames Barrier in London on the bottom right corner of the slide there. So the concept was updated since then to maintain the rising sector gate in the middle, aligning with the Federal Navigation Channel, but change the gates on either side to 2 sets of 2 tainter gates, which is 4 tainter gates total, 2 on each side of the rising sector gate in the middle. And then there's an image of the tainter gates as part of the Fox Point Hurricane Barrier in Providence, Rhode Island, shown in the middle of the images below. So tainter gates, which remain above the water when in the open position, they do have vertical restrictions. However, they are approximately 50% less expensive than unrestricted vertical clearance gates, such as the rising sector gate, which is proposed in the middle of the surge barrier. Life cycle costs for operations and maintenance are also less expensive, and this gate type is typically a better option if a lock system is implemented. For the lock system, you would essentially add an additional tainter gate in front of one of the others to create the configuration. It's kind of overly simplified, but to get the general idea, you can kind of see the green dashed lines on the drawing there show an additional tainter gate that represents the lock configuration, just to give you an idea. All right, so continuing south along the ocean front, we're going to move into the Rudy planning area. The remaining alignments here are also very similar to each other. They include a storm surge barrier comprised of a horizontal sector gate, similar to what we showed at Little Creek, along with a flood wall or dunes, which we'll discuss more in a moment. So the difference between this Rudy option 1 and 3 is the inclusion of a flood wall and in-water gate along the southern end through Lake Christine, which is shown in the Rudy 3 alignment on the right-hand side. Then if we circle back to the flood wall and dune measures, this is a specific area where we're really hoping to get some feedback from the public and other stakeholders. On the south side of Rudy Inlet, along Croatan Beach, the team is considering either a flood wall or dune option, which would follow a similar concept. But obviously there are trade-offs associated with each. So that's one area. You can kind of see it by the stars there on the map that we're looking for very specific feedback. And then on the north side of the inlet, there's the existing boardwalk, and there are kind of 2 draft concepts that have been developed for a flood wall on that side. And we're going to take a closer look at that. So here we see some draft cross sections of what we're calling the elevated walkway concept and the flood wall concept. We want to remind everyone that these are very preliminary drawings, and many details can and will change over time. The goal here is to have something more tangible to help illustrate the concepts and help us understand the general differences between the two in order to get constructive feedback. So on the right, we have the flood wall concept, which includes a small extension of the existing boardwalk that connects to a new, taller flood wall. I'll also just quickly note that we are considering the possibility of an adaptable option that could potentially allow for the wall to be constructed at a lower crest elevation initially, and then increase to the target crest elevation in the future. And any height shown here are based on the current design, which will be further refined and optimized as the study progresses. So the flood wall obviously has a much smaller footprint than the elevated walkway concept shown on the left side. For this elevated walkway, there's a gradient that connects the existing boardwalk to the top of the flood wall. That includes an additional walkway at the apex. Both of these options would include pedestrian access to the beach still. The intent of the elevated walkway concept was to continue to provide a walkway with unimpeded views of the ocean. However, this requires a more substantial design with a much larger footprint encroaching more on the beach. And again, with the Croatan and these conceptual designs for the resort beach flood wall, these are specific areas that we're really looking for feedback, and we'll go over some options to provide input at the end of the presentation. I think the website and the email has also been included in the chat, so we'll talk more about how you can provide input in this meeting and then in the future. So, all right. Next up, we have the Back Bay planning area, which kind of included Sandbridge as a sub area, although I realize it's not explicitly listed on this slide. Here we have the Atlantic Ocean as a flood source, but also significant flooding that propagates north through Back Bay. Since the previous meetings, several alignments have been screened, including any substantial structural measures in Sandbridge. There were also significant concerns about the feasibility of elevating any portion of Sandbridge Road, which was a critical component of the proposed alignments in terms of structural risk management for the area. So the Back Bay 3 option that's shown here originally included the elevation of a smaller portion of Sandbridge Road compared to the other Back Bay alignments. But while the decision has been made to no longer consider the elevation of Sandbridge Road going forward, we're discussing the possibility of another option along this portion, such as like a flood wall. So in addition to that potential Sandbridge Road component, an alignment in Back Bay would also include the elevation of Muddy Creek Road and potentially miter gates and associated flood wall and levee tie-ins across waterways. And then additional features such as dunes may be included to prevent wraparound flooding. So. Next planning area that we're going to talk about is the Southern Rivers. The primary flood source here is the North Landing River. One structural alignment is being carried forward for further evaluation. This includes an elevated roadway and an in-water gate adjacent to the West Neck Creek Bridge. There's also a levee section at the northern terminus to complete the line of protection and mitigate against wraparound flooding. And then you can see the stars on the inundation maps there in the middle. They depict the general location of the West Neck Creek Bridge to help give some perspective there. All right. Previously, for the eastern branch of the Elizabeth River, there was one general concept with 3 potential alignment locations moving progressively more inland. One alignment is being carried forward for further evaluation, and this is referred to as the Elizabeth River Option 1B. That's shown here on the slide. This proposes the alignment to the east side of the Norfolk Southern Railroad. And this is an adjustment from what was shown previously as alignment 1, which had the proposed structures to the west side of the railroad. This change was made in order to minimize impacts to nearby communities, oyster reefs, and the railroad itself. The concept includes a surge barrier comprised of a series of 5 tainter gates for navigation, to allow navigation, with sluice gates, banks for auxiliary flow on either end of those tainters. There would also be associated flood walls on either landward side of the surge barrier. And the location of this alignment does require coordination with the cities of Norfolk and Chesapeake. And similarly to the Little Creek alignment, the Norfolk CSRM currently includes a surge barrier at Broad Creek, which you can see with the star on the map to the left. And again, both teams and municipalities are tracking the potential implications of these similar alignments or nearby alignments. So we are tracking those. Apologize if I'm going fast. I know that there's a lot of information to cover, and I want to get through everything and then give time to talk more specifically about any things. And I'm sure they put in the chat, or we mentioned earlier, but the slides for the previous engagements, if you didn't attend those or see those, are also online. So if, you can compare some of what was shown previously and see how it's evolved more clearly today. So next up, So that was the last of our structural alignments. So I'm just going to briefly discuss non-structural measures. This is another type of measure that is being considered as part of the current study to address coastal storm risk. This slide covers information that we shared during our last round of public engagements, and it provides some very helpful general information on non-structural measures that we'd like to share with you once again today. So non-structural measures focus on reducing the consequences of flooding. In comparison, structural measures, which we just covered, reduce the probability of flooding by physically blocking or preventing the storm surge flooding. Non-structural measures are applied to a building to prevent damages from flooding. There's examples include dry flood proofing. That's one type of non-structural measure that we can consider, especially for critical infrastructure such as fire stations and police stations, for example. You can see in some of the pictures on this slide examples of dry flood proofing, such as the installation of temporary flood panels or flood logs, or the elevation of exterior supporting equipment such as HVAC units. This can be a cost-effective option and may preserve the existing aesthetics of a building without significantly altering the building exterior. Non-structural measures may also include home elevations, elevating residential structures. Then for the purpose of this study, we'll be considering non-structural measures within each of the 7 planning areas that were shown earlier on slide 11. So non-structural measures may be considered standalone or in combination with other structural measures and or natural and hybrid infrastructure. So definitely hoping to have some more specific details in the near future on things like non-structural measures. So appreciate everyone's patience getting through all of that. And I'm going to turn it over to Justine to talk about the natural and hybrid infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. As Heather mentioned at the beginning of the call, my name is Justine Woodward, and I am the environmental lead for this study. I just wanted to let you all know that I am actually en route back to Norfolk District in a vehicle. So if there's some background noise, please bear with me. But I'm thankful that technology allows me also to be able to present this portion of the presentation to you today. So another type of measure that we are investigating in this study is natural and hybrid infrastructure. As Nicole mentioned earlier, natural and hybrid infrastructure, or NHI, leverages existing natural processes and landscapes in combination with engineered designs to mitigate coastal storm surge risk and build resilience in communities. So to put it even more simply, using nature and engineering to manage risk. Some of you who may have participated in earlier public engagements may have heard us use the terminology nature-based solutions. So we just wanted to acknowledge that shift in terminology going forward. As we investigate NHI as part of this study, we will be focusing on the Back Bay and Lynn Haven watersheds. We have welcomed a new study team member earlier this year from the Army Corps of Engineers Engineering with Nature program out of the Engineer Research and Development Center, or ERDIC. Additionally, we have also been able to collaborate with the University of Virginia's Natural Infrastructure Laboratory to assist in developing and identifying locations for natural and hybrid infrastructure solutions that we can continue to evaluate in the study. So the Norfolk District and the City of Virginia Beach have hosted 2 workshops with various stakeholders to continue to move this effort forward. The most recent workshop was actually just held last week on January 14th. So today we are providing a broad overview of natural and hybrid infrastructure, but I encourage you to stay tuned as we will have more to share with you during future public engagement opportunities on how this is moving forward as part of the feasibility study. Next slide, please. So as we wrap up the presentation portion of today's webinar, we would just like to highlight the additional engagement opportunities occurring over the next week. We will be hosting another webinar next Tuesday outside of standard business hours, so it will begin at 6 p.m. And we will be sharing the same slide deck that we're sharing with you all today. We are also hosting 3 in-person meetings next week as well. Just important to note, we are anticipating inclement weather over the weekend, so certainly any pertinent announcements relevant to cancellations of those meetings would be posted on the project website and would be shared via social media outlets if that is determined necessary. But we would like to invite you to those in-person meetings. It's really a great opportunity to also meet the study team in person and continue the discussion regarding the different elements of the project. Stakeholder feedback and feedback from the public is such an important part of this process. So we welcome your questions and input today. And then, as Heather also mentioned earlier, we will be hosting additional public engagements in the future. We do not have those dates and times announced at this time, determined or announced at this time. So please stay tuned to the project website for more information as we move forward. If your neighborhood or community group is interested in receiving a presentation in the future, please feel free to reach out to our team. We would be happy to accommodate that request. You can also send general inquiries regarding the project to the project email address that is shown on the slide. And with that, I am going to turn it back to you, Heather.
Well, thanks, Andrew, Nicole, and Justine for presenting for us. So now we will shift over to the question and answer. So I think first what I will do is look at the chat and just kind of go through those, and then we will open it up for anyone who'd like to come off mute. So one of the first questions was about sharing the slide deck. So yes, absolutely. We will be sharing both this recorded meeting, so that way you have the commentary behind the slides, as well as the slides individually on our website. So we will work with our public affairs office to get those on within the next day or so. And let's see, what else do we have here? So there is a question about the dunes or flood wall at Croatan Beach. So I'll just read that. So given there is already a dune on Croatan Beach, assume the current elevation is not high enough. What is the flood wall or dune design elevation? And then there, consider gray infrastructure like a buried flood wall installed under the dune. Or how, I guess, question of have we considered that? And then another consideration is dredging Lake Christine, which is a non-tidal lake, to increase the stormwater storage capacity and protect the proposed flood wall. So I'm going to pass that off to our engineering lead, and she can help give some answers and context for you there, Patrick. Thanks for the question.
Sure. Nicole, can we go back to like a visual slide just so people can have something to look at? I can't remember which it is, but yeah, so for your first question in there, right, for the design elevation that we'd be targeting, the existing Croatan dune does not meet that for the 1% annual exceedance probability. So what we're targeting for oceanside beaches is 21 feet as the dune crest elevation. Specifically for Resort Beach, that's a little lower, which was calculated separately. But yeah, so that is the dune elevation. And then for structural elevation, in terms of like the flood wall we're proposing, that's at 19 feet. And then your question or statement. Okay, yeah, dredging Lake Christine could certainly provide some additional storage. Um, Unfortunately, that wouldn't quite help with reducing the coastal storm surge to like a large capacity. If we kind of just look at, for example, maybe the figure on the right-hand side here, we would still, it wouldn't, when surge comes in, I'm sure we all live in coastal communities. It would require quite a bit of dredging to take that to a volume to accumulate enough to create any impacts in terms of reductions in water elevations to the communities behind it. So that's something we could look at further, but that's just my first kind of gut reaction to, that dredging suggestion, but certainly something we can investigate further. Um,
Is
okay.
it okay if I just kind of clarify a little bit?
Yeah, Patrick, sure.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. That's all helpful information. I think part of it is, when you have a storm come in, we're going to have rain too, right? I mean, you look at hurricanes in North Carolina, 100 inches of rain. I mean, it has to go somewhere. So whether it's the storm surge, which is that, it sounds like that's the number one priority, but I guess is there a consideration for the rainfall all that happens behind the flood wall?
Yeah, so we are required to, anytime we propose like a structural measure that might change the interior drainage of a watershed, we do have to evaluate those impacts and come up with a design to mitigate those impacts, meaning we would be looking at pumping stations, potentially like what you're suggesting here, creating additional storage internally in the watershed to take on some of that precipitation. But yeah, we have to kind of break it down between the two hazards, right? So in this study, we are formulating our structural measures to combat the coastal storm surge risk. And then whatever interior drainage impacts those measures cause, we have to mitigate that. So that's where what your suggestion, Patrick, you're giving would come into play there, if that makes sense. I hope that's not very confusing and clear.
No, it's fine. Yeah. I appreciate you listening, Shannon. Yeah, there's more to talk about, but I'll let somebody else ask a question. Thank you.
Well, before we go on to the next one, I'll just open it up, make sure there isn't any other questions on that previous discussion or comments. Okay, we have one more in the chat. Given the loss of view and loss of beach width for the elevated walkway on the oceanfront, don't the hotels strongly oppose it? And I don't know, maybe if the city of Virginia Beach, maybe if you guys want to tackle that one.
Yeah, hold on, let me turn my camera on real quick. Yeah, this is Mike Tippin with the city of Virginia Beach. That is definitely a concern, and that is why we have the two options with the elevated boardwalk and then the flood wall. And if you recall, back when we were talking about the flood wall at the oceanfront, it would be adaptable. We're looking at it being adaptable, meaning the top of the wall initially would sit at elevation 16. And then in the future, it could build up to just adding on top of it to elevation 19. So that's anticipating, the hotelers and residents, just beachfront people for the elevated walkway being a concern. That's what the other option is for, the flood wall concept. And Al, I don't know if that answered your question, but that's, kind of what we're anticipating is there's some concern from the hotels for sure.
Thanks, Mike. Anyone else have any comments or questions on that one? Okay, we have another one in the chat. Will the additional funding for the mega bundle project have any effects on the CSRM project? I'm not sure what the mega bundle project is. Is that a city?
I'll take this.
Okay, thank you.
The two are completely independent. Coastal storm risk management is partnership with the Corps and the city. We have it fully funded for this study portion. So they're completely independent from one another. So there'd be no financial impact between the two.
Thanks, Mike. And also from the federal side, we are lucky also in fiscal year 25, we got all of the funding on the federal side as well for the study portion. So no funding impacts on our end either. Any other questions on that, comments? Okay, that is the last one in the chat. So now I can open it up to others that are online that might want to come off mute, ask some additional questions. We have plenty of time. So I'll just pause here. Go ahead, Dewey.
Hi, so can someone speak to the coordination between the Norfolk City risk management efforts and the Virginia Beach?
Sure, I can take that one. So with both of these projects kind of coming out of the Norfolk district, we're lucky to have some team members that are also on both projects. And so there's a lot of internal collaboration between the project teams at the Norfolk district. But then we also have had a series of meetings between the cities and joint meetings. We actually had one the first week of January where we had both Virginia Beach and Norfolk core teams, as then we had the city of Virginia Beach, the city of Norfolk, and the city of Chesapeake present. So we've kind of continued that collaboration and coordination ongoing with them to make sure that they're aware of all of these alignments, and especially the ones that kind of cross into city bounds. And we'll continue that open dialogue and coordination as we move forward. Was there anything specific or any suggestions maybe that you have for us to continue that?
So are the public invited to these? I presume there's some type of integration effort for each one of the three cities you mentioned. Is the public invited to those forums or those discussions?
The ones we've had to date, no, they've been more kind of internal, like team level, and then their leadership but we do anticipate, as we move forward, continuing to have more public engagement and opportunities between the cities as well.
So is there a specific integration strategy or plan other than formal or informal meetings?
Right now, we are, since the Norfolk study or the Norfolk project is in design and construction, we have to kind of coordinate, but the Virginia Beach one, since it's in the study phase, we can't guarantee that, certain things will move forward on a Virginia Beach study. So we have to kind of play the, our cards right with hoping that certain things move forward, just like we mentioned, like the Broad Creek barrier, it could be impacted by our Elizabeth River alignment. But again, we have to kind of move and progress our study forward. It has to go through that next milestone, the tentatively selected plan, and get in that. And then ultimately, our recommended plan, get to assigned chiefs report in 2028. And then we have to be authorized to enter into design and construction for any of those elements. And so we don't want to delay the Norfolk's study, or I keep saying studies, or the Norfolk's project and their designs and construction. But we, again, have to have that consistent collaboration so that way they're aware of these options that might be on the table moving forward. I would say the strategy is just consistent communication. We have quarterly meetings set up now internally. And, as things progress and we can get in front of different city councils to keep them up to date and then share as they see fit is kind of our current strategy.
Heather, if I can add anything, I absolutely, I agree with everything. I would just say that certainly, Dewey, for your information, before we can recommend a plan, we have to get a letter of support, not only from our non-federal sponsor, but if there are areas that impact the city of Norfolk and the city of Chesapeake, we would also have to get a letter of support for them. So nothing is going to happen without certainly going out to the public. And as Heather mentioned, coordinating with those communities to make sure that this is something that's constructible.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Any other questions or comments that we can help answer today? Or I can open it up to our team. If there's anything additional anyone would like to add. Go ahead, Shannon.
Yeah, I would just say if you could take the time to, I know everyone has brought up the input that we've been requesting, but it will help us kind of make these decisions. We would really like on the key decision points that Nicole was highlighting, going through the structural measures, we'd like public input. And we want to integrate that into the designs as best we can. So please do not forget to go and take that extra step after this meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Heather, I just wanted to reiterate thanks to everyone so much for joining us this afternoon. We know that everybody has busy schedules, but as Shannon mentioned, it's so important for us to get that feedback. One of the key pieces of recommending a plan ultimately is, is it acceptable? And so understanding certainly the public's view on what we ultimately recommend is key, I think, in moving a project forward.
Thanks, Michelle. All right, last call for anything today. And so again, we do have other engagements coming up in the next 2 weeks. I'll just say that the in-person public meetings are open house style. So it's a 2-hour window. There will be storyboards, so large posters that'll look very similar to what you saw today, but we'll also have all of our team members present, especially our team leads. And so if there's specific questions on a certain discipline, we will be there to help provide answers and another opportunity to provide comments. So we appreciate again everything that you guys have asked so far and for listening through this presentation. And we hope to continue to get feedback and maybe see you all again in the future. But with that, we will conclude today's webinar and hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday. And if we get that inclement weather, everyone stays safe and warm. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.